Oh, Lord. Somebody once told me the world is gonna roll me.
All right. Finally, we are on the last book in the Ken Ham trilogy. It is Ready to Return by Ken Ham and other people. And what do you know? Our very own Britt Beamer is back from the America's Research Group. So, do you think this book is going to have a survey? You betcha. So, right away, should you read it? No. So, the purpose of the book is. I'm not entirely sure, actually. I know what the book's stated purpose is.
Bringing back the church's lost generation. Many of them have lost their Christian worldview because they've lost their biblical foundation, and we need to return them to the authority of the Word of God.
That's what the book claims to be about. So the majority of the book is really just rehashing the results of the survey from Already Gone. And then the book ends with 18 pages that are about proposing a solution for parents and churches of how to keep our young people in the church, which really was something I thought was supposed to be covered in Already Gone, but whatever. I gotta be honest, I don't get it. Like, okay, there's a new survey that they put out, and it is unique in the sense that it shows different denominations. So, as a part of the survey, you showed what denomination you're a part of, and then you do the rest of the responses. And so, the survey is actually pretty interesting because you can see a breakdown of how different denominations tended to answer questions differently. And sometimes there are pretty drastic differences. But I failed to see how the survey actually provides material for the book because Ken Ham, once again, being the genius that he is, all he does is make the same exact points as the previous books, and he comes to the same conclusions.
The same solutions really apply.
So the only thing I could think of for why they would even bother to write this book in the first place was that someone on their computer at answersingenesis.org had a backlog of all these articles that they hadn't published yet. And then they come along, say, hey, we're going to do a new survey, so we need to write a new book. And they said, hey, great, we have all this material already. Let's just throw it all together.
And that's what I do. I just sit down and just type it out, and then I send articles to Mark, and I think they're ready.
And the whole thing just felt half-baked. And as I was reading it, I was becoming more and more agitated because I kept thinking to myself, what's the point of this book? Like, what are they trying to get at? What are they building towards? And then it clicked. I figured it out. Each chapter is the exact same thing. Young people are being indoctrinated by secular society, and we need to teach them a literal interpretation of Genesis chapters 1 through 11 in order to save them. And that's it. If you've read one chapter in this book, seriously, you've read them all because the book doesn't actually go anywhere. And here's the whole conclusion of the book. This comes at the very last chapter when they actually sort of say something new, but not really. If you're a parent, you need to homeschool your kids, but only with the material that Answers in Genesis provides or supports. And if you're a pastor, start focusing on apologetics and correct biblical teaching, especially as it pertains to creation. Resources for this can be found at answersingenesis.org. And that's it. There is no in-depth exploration of various ways you could do that. There's no in-depth exploration of, well, what could homeschooling look like for someone? What are different ways you can go about that? As a pastor, what are different ways you can start teaching this stuff in your churches? But he never actually goes into details. And that's probably the most frustrating thing that stands out to me from all these books is Ken Ham proposes solutions, but they are just so bare bones. It's like, what are you supposed to do with this? Because all it can be boiled down to is teach Genesis 1 through 11 literally. Like, that is the breadth and the depth of his entire thing. So, analysis of the book overall. I'm not going to go into details of the book because I've already put more detail into my review than they put into writing it. And that's actually my analysis of the entire book. It feels like they didn't put any effort into it. They're just rehashing the same points they've already made over and over again.
So that gives you a little summary of the book, Ready to Return.
So don't read it, don't buy it, that's it. Thanks for joining me, guys, and I will see you next time. Okay, if you can tell, I am not a huge fan of Ken Ham. And that is not because I think he's a bad guy. That's not because I think he's unchristian. I really cannot get behind a lot of the stuff that he teaches And after reading his books, it's really frustrating that I feel like I got suckered into buying 3 books that don't say anything different from each other. You could make the argument that Already Compromised is somewhat unique in that they surveyed Christian colleges instead of young adults. But even then, their conclusions are the same. Their solutions to a proposed problem is the same. So that's going to do it for my review of Ken Ham's book, Ready to Return. If you liked this, leave a like, leave a comment, subscribe, all that stuff. The next video I'm going to do, I'm actually going to wrap up or really summarize some of my thoughts on Ken Ham and kind of why I got a little animated at parts when I'm reviewing these, because there are some things I do want to say. And especially for people who are fans of Ken Ham, I think it might be good to hear some of this. And look, if you are a fan of Ken Ham, I think that's fine. You can be a fan. I am not saying that people who are fans of Ken Ham are any less. I'm not trying to say that. But I will say there are things about Ken Ham's approach, there are things about his beliefs that need to be looked at critically. And the truth is, you know what? I wouldn't say anything about Ken Ham at all if it weren't for the fact that he has now created a voice in the conversation of young adult ministry that now I have to address because people in churches are reading these books and they're buying into what he's saying.
But that's a trilogy that I think is one of the most definitive works now available for what's actually happened in our churches, for the state of Christendom. Many of the surveys that are done just ask people what they believe and they sort of collate that.
But whatever, I'll get more into that in my next video, which is kind of a review on Ken Ham himself.
It's done. It's over now.